The first God of War, originally released in 2005, and set a very high standard straight out the gate. A hack and slash game set in Greece during a time when gods and monsters were running wild. God of War was unlike anything before it, and it was really good. Then, 2 years later, they released God of War 2, and once again, Santa Monica Studios knocked it out of the park. It was bigger and epicer and violenter and proved that this was a winning formula. Another 3 years go by and the best of the old school God of War games is released, God of War 3. Somehow they once again did the impossible and set an even higher bar for the series. God of War 3 was and still is an absolute bombastic masterpiece in nearly every department. The combat was vicious and fun, and the story was worthy of being called a Greek tragedy, and for a PS3 game it was stunning visually. My point with all this is that God of War has always met and gone above expectations with each of its sequels, except for Ascension that one time, but still, my point stands. Fast forward a bit to 2016, where the first footage of God of War 4 premiered at that year's E3 presentation. I remember seeing it for the first time. It didn't really look like God of War, it was new and different. As a longtime God of War fan, by that point I was skeptical to say the least. Like I said, it didn't look like anything God of War had ever done. This was God of War completely reimagined. Change can be good, don't get me wrong, but this was a pretty big change, and it was a series that I really loved. Kratos now had a beard and a son, he was in a new land with a new main weapon, and the gameplay was similar enough but still very different. Despite my initial apprehension, I still got really hyped for the game the closer it got to releasing. I bought a Maxx to terrorize my now wife with, and stood in line at GameStop opening night to get my hands on the game. I started it up and was blown away by the following experience. It was amazing, different, but amazing. This wasn't a reboot, but a continuation of the story in a new and mysterious land with a whole batch of new, colorful characters. Just like the series he fronts, Kratos had gotten older and matured. I remember someone describing the story as either being told from Atreus' viewpoint if you hadn't played any previous God of War games, or being from Kratos' perspective if you had. That made it new player friendly, while simultaneously being a rewarding and emotional experience for returning fans like myself. The scene where Kratos has to return to his home and retrieve the Blades of Chaos packs an emotional punch if you know what he's been through with those blades. It is such a brilliant sequence. The game is really good, and one of my personal favorite games of all time. So fast forward another 4 years, and it's time for this new, innovative God of War to get its first, and hopefully not last, sequel, God of War Ragnarok. With each new game surpassing the last in the series, it was time to see if they could keep that streak going with this new direction. And I am very happy to say that they totally nailed it once again. God of War Ragnarok is absolutely fantastic, and I love it. And we're going to talk about why in this video. I know the intro was a tad long, but hey, we did it. We got through it, and now we can actually talk about the game. If you got this far into the video, then leave a like down below. It helps out the channel a ton. And maybe subscribe if you want to do that. Now let's just get on with it. I made a point earlier about how God of War has nearly always topped the previous game with its sequel, and seeing how Ragnarok is a sequel for 2018 God of War, I feel like this is a good way to review and talk about the game. It truly is a sequel done right, and I want to get into why I think that is. I am going to avoid spoilers for the most part. There are some things I want to talk about that are definitely spoilers, but if you haven't played the game yet, there will be plenty of warning beforehand. That being said, let's start with gameplay to be safe. Obviously, gameplay wise, it's very similar to the previous game. It's a third-person, over-the-shoulder action-adventure game that is presented like it's one continuous shot, just like the 2018 game. There have been some changes to combat and traversal that I think are very welcome. Since you have the Blades of Chaos from the beginning of the game this time around, they play a much bigger role in how you move and explore the world of the game. You can now use them to basically grapple onto ledges and instantly pull Kratos up, which cuts out a lot of the slow climbing sections present in the first game. They are not gone entirely, mind you, but a lot of them have been replaced with this new, quicker climbing method. You can also swing across chasms, which adds more variety to the exploration and the puzzle solving you'll encounter. Having both the Leviathan axe and the blades from the beginning means just more variety in puzzle solving mechanics in general, which helps keep things interesting. You'll also acquire new items and skills throughout the game to improve upon this even more. The existing mechanics all return and are then built on with new mechanics. The exploration of the world never really felt tedious or boring. The varying mechanics help keep things fresh, while the actual environments you explore are all gorgeous and mysterious. This combination makes you want to explore every crack and crevice you can find. At least it did for me. The combat has also had a bit of an overhaul from the previous game. Unfortunately, you don't start the game with all the skills you unlock in the previous game, and you have to re-unlock most of them. This is a bummer, but also something that's kind of always been a thing in these games, so it's not overly surprising that it's present here. There are some new abilities you get from the start though. Like this time around, you can power up the elemental power of Kratos' two weapons to use special attacks that either apply frost or burn to enemies. The Leviathan axe applies the frost effect, while the blades apply burn. Do enough frost or burn damage and you can freeze the opponent or even set them on fire. Another addition is the mastering of skills once you unlock them. If you get a new skill and then you use it in combat a certain number of times, then you can apply additional effects to it. For example, you can make it so it does more damage or increases its elemental power. Once a skill has been mastered, you can change its bonus ability at any time. I really like this feature because it encouraged me to switch up which attacks I was using more often. I'm a creature of habit when it comes to that, so any game that pushes me to use a greater variety of attacks is always nice. Atreus is also back to help out in combat and mostly plays the same. The biggest difference with him this time around is that you can disable his skills, which allow you to directly control how much he participates in each fight. It's a neat idea, one I didn't really utilize myself, but I understand why it was included. Also, shout out for the team at Santa Monica for including over 70 accessibility options for this game. This game is the most accessible God of War game ever, and if you're interested, check out how much thought and effort they put into making sure as many people could experience this game as possible. It's just awesome and something I'm glad the industry is embracing. In addition to all that, there is also a new level of verticality to the combat. Many of the areas you'll face enemies in contain 2 levels that you can jump between with ease. This makes each combat counter a bit more unique and also means you need to pay more attention to your surroundings because enemies could be coming from any direction. You can also use some items in the environment in combat, such as using the blades to chuck a massive rock at your enemies. It's not a super big addition, but I do appreciate the bit of variety it provides. Another change is the use of the shield. In God of War 2018, the shield could only be used to block and parry, and you couldn't really customize it in any way. In this game, you can actually change which shield you have equipped, and different shields provide different purposes. Smaller shields offer less defense but give you the ability to parry attacks with the right timing. There are now bigger shields like the Stonewall shield, which can take more hits and provides better defense, but doesn't allow you to parry at all. I personally like parrying, so I use those shields the most, but it's just another added layer of customization that I think helps keep each fight fresh and interesting. Additionally, the enemy variety is more diverse this time around, so that's pretty cool. The game is also rather hard at times. Not that that should really come as a surprise. God of War has always been on the difficult side of things. The main game fights and boss fights aren't super hard compared to the side content fights, but they still aren't pushovers. I'm average to below average when it comes to video game skill, and I didn't really struggle with the main story stuff at all. Well, some of the side quests made me want to chuck my controller through a wall. Luckily, there is a give me a story difficult option for those who just want to see the story without tearing their hair out. Also, I feel like it's worth mentioning here that there is a significant amount of side quests and challenges to complete alongside the main story. I finished the main game in about 30 hours or so, and I still have a bunch of side quests to complete. Alright, real quick, let's talk about how the game actually looks. It looks spectacular. Now, admittedly, the graphical leap between this game and God of War 2018 isn't as massive or noticeable. Still, this is a fantastic looking game, and it's kind of impressive they got it to look this good on the PS4 too. I know that caused a bit of controversy when it was first announced, but I understand why they want to make sure PS4 players could experience this game too. The first one was a PS4 game after all. Plus, there's still a ton of people who can't get PS5s, so I get it. It would have been nice to see what they could have done if it was a PS5 exclusive, but we'll probably get that with the next game anyway. Alright folks, it's story time to talk about the story. Let's do it. Here we go. So I'm gonna start this off by talking about my overall thoughts on the story without spoiling anything. If you played God of War 2018 or have any interest in checking out these games, then you should go in as blind as possible and just enjoy the ride. The story is on another level with these two games and is one of the strongest parts of them. Dip out now if that's what you want. If you're still here, I'm not going to spoil anything yet, and I will let you know before I do. God of War Ragnarok story is very, 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 very good. I'm most definitely biased because I've loved these games for years, so keep that in mind, but I love the story. It's emotional, action-packed, and full of lovable and relatable characters. I think the writers did a fantastic job using the original Norse mythology and the stories within it to tell their own version. I mean, Kratos being involved at all drastically changes things from the get, but they still do a lot of tweaking and using their own interpretation of the mythology to tell this story. This obviously isn't a direct translation of the original Norse stuff, but it's a hell of a lot closer than Thor Ragnarok, so hey, there's there's that. I truly admire the way they took events from the mythology and filtered it through the version of the world they've built. I can't really get into specifics without spoiling things, but it was really well done in my opinion. At the core of the story is Kratos and his son Atreus, and their quest to change their fate. The 9 realms are threatened by the looming end of the world, Ragnarok, not to mention the ruler of Asgard, Odin, and his various schemes acting as the overarching villain of the game. The game is all about staring down prophecies and doing everything in your power to alter your own fate. The whole narrative is bolstered by a fantastic cast of actors who play each character wonderfully. In my opinion, no one in this game is miscast, and they all give it 110%, which is important because this is a very character-driven game. Not just the main 2 who are obviously great, but everyone else too. The story that kicked off in 2018 comes to a close in this game, so it has a lot of ground to cover in order to wrap everything up neatly in a nice little bow. That's a tall order, and I personally believe they knocked it out of the park. By the time the credits rolled, I was thoroughly satisfied with the story I just experienced. It was a roller coaster of a story that hit a lot of highs, and I enjoyed nearly every minute of it. Some sections went on a bit too long for my liking and might make subsequent playthroughs slightly tedious, but they still serve the story, and I never felt like any of it was just filler. Everything in the game's story seemed so well thought out to me. Moments that seem insignificant at the time have a way of coming back up later, sometimes in small ways and sometimes in bigger ways. A lot of care and attention was put into it. I think that shines through. I like the story a lot, is my point. Now, I want to talk about some spoiler stuff real quick. I'm not spoiling the ending or the whole story or anything like that, but these are some pretty significant plot points I'm about to discuss, so if you haven't played the game yet, then, go away. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like this video. Alright, that was your last chance. Here we go with some spoilers. Atreus is fully playable this time around. That's right, folks. He even has its own sections of the story where you play as him without Kratos even being around. This adds a whole new layer of variety and changes up the pace of the game in a way I really like, for the most part. At his core, he still plays like Kratos, but with a heavier focus on long-range attacks. That being said, you can also just melee with him as much as you want, so do that if you prefer. His sections are the ones I mentioned earlier that can drag on for a bit after a while, but they are also some of the more interesting parts of the story, so that kind of helps balance things out. These sections might be more tedious the second time you play through them, but I don't think I'll really mind. Another big change this time around is that Atreus isn't your only AI combat companion this time around. A couple of different ones play smaller roles for small sections of the game, but you get another main one with, another quick spoiler warning, Freya. Some ways in the game, Kratos and Freya form an alliance against Odin, even though Kratos killed her son and all that mess. Once they get past that, she can take the place of Atreus for parts of the game. She even has her own skills and abilities to purchase an upgrade. I love this, and I love the replayabilities this potentially adds to the game. At different parts of the story, you can tackle side quests and challenges with either Atreus as your companion or with Freya. Depending on which one is with you, you'll get different dialogue and interactions. Probably not the most significant thing, but I think it'd be really fun to see the different ways they react to things. It could add a nice bit of change for the replays of the game. That's really all I want to talk about on spoilers. I truly don't want to ruin the experience for anyone, and you should play the game yourself. The story is good and full of surprises, and I liked it. Okay, well, thanks for watching this review type thing. It was mostly just me talking about why I like this game, but I hope it was at least interesting to watch. I totally recommend playing this yourself. It has been called a masterpiece by a few people, and I'm inclined to agree. Oh, I think overall I still like 2018 a bit more just because it was such a new and innovative take on God of War, and this just builds on this, which is great. This is what sequels should be. Take what was great about the previous game and build on them in fun and interesting ways. God of War has always excelled at that, and they nailed it here again. Anyway, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Maxx. We do stuff here I think is pretty good in my totally unbiased opinion. Check out this game, it's great, and I'll see you in whatever I do next.